Sometimes, while solving dissolution sums, we will find a workman compensation reserve appearing in the liability side of the balance sheet. Workman compensation reserve, it's a specific reserve which is created in order to provide for any sudden liability that may arise. Let's say some workmen in a factory are involved in an accident and accident compensation is payable to such workmen. In this video, we will learn treatment of workmen compensation reserve in this chapter of dissolution of partnership firm. The basic concept is that to the extent of the claim, the workman compensation claim, information of which will be given in the additional information after the balance sheet. To this extent of claim, we need to transfer the reserve to the credit side of realization account, and the balance of workman compensation reserve, if any, has to be distributed among the partners in profit sharing ratio. Additionally, the claim will have to be paid off by passing the entry realization account debit to cash or bank account. So in this video, we will understand the treatment of workman compensation reserve in various scenarios. So let's go to those example sums. This is the assumption in all the examples which will be discussed. The partnership firm of X and Y is being dissolved, and X and Y are partners sharing profits in the ratio of 3:2. So this is the assumption for all the cases which will be discussed. We'll begin with the first case. No liability against the workman compensation reserve. That is, a workman compensation claim is 0. Example, the workman compensation reserve in the liability side of the balance sheet is rupees 75,000 and there is no liability against the workman compensation reserve. Now there is no liability against the reserve, so the entire reserve is free and will have to be distributed among the partners X and Y in their profit sharing ratio, which is 3:2, and the journal entry to be passed is workman compensation reserve account debit rupees 75,000 to X's capital account rupees 45,000 to Y's capital account rupees 30,000 for distribution of the workman compensation reserve. Let's deal with the second case. The amount of the liability is less than the amount of the workman compensation reserve. Let's say the workman compensation reserve in the liability side of the balance sheet is rupees 60,000, and in the additional information it's given that the liability or the workman compensation claim is ascertained at rupees 35,000. As far as the workman compensation reserve is concerned, to the extent of rupees 35,000, the amount of the claim, we will transfer to credit side of the realization account, and the balance amount will be distributed among the partners in their profit sharing ratio 3:2. So the journal entry for the same would be workman compensation reserve account debit 60,000 rupees to realization account rupees 35,000 to excess capital account 15,000. The balance 25,000 is distributed in 3:2 between X and Y, and the share of X is 15,000 and to Y's capital account, the share of Y, 10,000 rupees. Now again, we need to pay off the liability and journal entry for the same. Realization account debit, 35,000 rupees to bank account, 35,000 rupees to pay off the liability against the reserve. Case 3. What happens if the amount of the liability is exactly equal to the amount of Workmen Compensation Reserve? Let's say the Workmen Compensation Reserve, the liability side of the balance sheet is rupees 60,000 and the claim or the liability against the reserve is ascertained at rupees 60,000. Now in this case, we need to transfer the entire reserve to the credit of the realization account by passing the entry Workmen Compensation Reserve account debit rupees 60,000 to realization account rupees 60,000. Additionally, the liability of rupees 60,000 needs to be paid off by passing the entry realization account debit rupees 60,000 to bank account rupees 60,000. Let's discuss the next case when the amount of the liability is more than the amount of the Workmen Compensation Reserve. Let's say the Workmen Compensation Reserve in the liability side of the balance sheet appears at rupees 60,000, and in the additional information we have the liability given against the reserve as rupees 75,000. Now in this case, the amount of the claim or the liability is greater than the amount of the reserve. So to the extent of the reserve, we will transfer to the credit side of the realization account by passing the entry Workmen Compensation Reserve account debit rupees 60,000 to realization account rupees 60,000, and the claim needs to be paid off. Journal entry for the same realization account debit rupees 75,000 to bank account rupees 75,000. The final case 5. There is no Workmen Compensation Reserve appearing in the liability side of the balance sheet, but the additional information says there's a liability for compensation claim payable. Example, there is no Workmen Compensation Reserve and firm had to pay rupees 15,000 as compensation to the workers. So we just pay off the liability. There is no reserve which can be transferred to the credit of the realization account. We will just have to pay off the rupees 15,000 liability by passing the entry realization account debit rupees 15,000 to bank account rupees 15,000. So in this video, we've learnt the treatment of Workmen Compensation Reserve in various scenarios in this chapter of dissolution of partnership firm.